Jeremy wants out of the single market. Well, he does now anyway. Chuka wants to stay in the single market, at least for a long transitional period. Barry wants out of the single market and the customs union. At least that's what he said on Monday. Now, Carol and Michelle, I know that you think it's boring when I bang on about Brexit. You do as well, Nick. But this is the final week and I just couldn't help myself because I know Greg is here to support me. The Labour Party is all over the place when it comes to its stance on Brexit. Whether we should stay part of the key trade groups. There seems to be a bit of playing the Brexit wheel of fortune, selecting policies seemingly at random and seeing how they land. Worst of all, Jeremy Corbyn seems to be willing to follow Theresa May towards a hard Brexit. But the whole purpose of an official opposition is to challenge the government and offer an alternative vision. And since the majority of Labour voters think Brexit is a mistake, the party should speak up for them and put forward a plan for a softer and safer, and dare I say it, smarter Brexit. Oh yes, and that would protect the future of the Labour Party as well as the whole country. Greg, I'm very
June,
happy that you're here.
Well, I'm here, I suspect, to support you.
Yes, please.
But we know that Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were always Brexiteers. They always were. They were Brexiteers years ago. If you talk to the Tories, who in those days were quite a small group, who used to vote against everything,
those two were
McDonnell and Corbyn were always in their camp. Yeah. What always interests me about the left is that they believe very vehemently in Labour Party policy until it doesn't agree with what they want, and then they can do something else. I mean, someone has got to start making the case for a soft Brexit or even no Brexit. Yeah. And it's not going to happen in the Labour Party. It's not going to happen in the Labour Party because of the current leadership. And what is weird is you look at who voted for them in the last election, where they got this overwhelming vote amongst younger people who also were overwhelmingly in favour of remaining. And so you've got this strange contradictory position from those people. I hope at some stage, and it's probably one of those times when politics should break up about traditional basis and say, look, there are people in favour and there are people against. Yeah. I still live in hope that we won't go.
Do you think it's possible?
I think it's unlikely, but I can have my...
Yeah,
I can live in
you
hope.
can dream.
I mean, it's interesting, in the polls, there's only about 20% like you and I who still dream that actually something else will happen. But I mean, week after week, month after month, you come across I come across different bits of the economy in academia or in medicine or the rest of it, and they all think it's going to be a disaster.
A disaster. Well, you know, this is why. So back to your point, Greg, about the Labour leadership. Can I finish, please? Back to Greg's very smart point, his salient point about I think the Labour leadership actually has to be in favour of a soft Brexit, because if you look at the statistics, 67% of Labour voters actually think Brexit is a mistake. So therefore, they're not in line with where their party wants to be, where their voters want to be. It's not about what Jeremy Corbyn wants. Surely it should be what...
A soft Brexit will be disastrous. You're talking about something... You want to be still part of the EEA, the
single market and the customs union.
And so you'd have something like a Norwegian model. That will be disastrous.
Why?
We have to pay...
Norway's done...
Norwegian model. Bloody disaster.
Norway's done quite well out of that.
We have to pay a massive fee to be part of that. Our borders remain wide open. We have no control about who comes in. We have to follow EC, European Court of Justice, rules, and we don't know
until we start negotiating properly.
We don't have a seat at the table, which means we have even less sovereignty than we have now. This would be a disaster for our country.
Totally disagree with you on that.
And the thing is, the Labour Party are unified. You just don't like it. Corbyn has said clearly we've got to stay in the single market. Also, he has been tougher than he's been tougher than the Tories. He wants to ban the wholesale importation of EU.
The Labour Party are not unified. That's the whole problem. They are all over the place when it comes to Brexit. So I'm going to pick up what Chuka said. So Chukwuemeka, yes.
He's powerful in the Labour Party now.
Chukwuemeka said the overwhelming majority of Labour members think we should be fighting to stay in the single market.
And nobody's listening to Chukwuemeka anymore.
Well,
he's not in cabinet. He's not got any power.
And then I'm going to... These percentages.
Because they're true.
Polls are completely... The polls said Hillary Clinton would win. The polls said that
you're like Corbyn. You change your mind when it suits you. You like a poll when it supports your view. Always.
He always hates figures. He's always hated figures.
Okay, so I've got another quote. And this is Barry Gardiner, God bless him. He says, Brexit means leaving the single market and the customs union. 52% who voted to leave the EU would consider it a con if Britain was out of Europe but still subservient to its laws and its institutions.
He's completely right.
He's not.
And
I don't see how negotiating a proper deal means that we're subservient to the EU. Michelle, I'm sure you've got something to say.
If we're Norwegian deal, anyway.
Go on, Michelle.
I do just find it quite boring when people are... Honestly, I do. When people are just constantly trying to do all these polls and all these opinions, and to me, I get staggered by when people say, oh, the will of the people, the 52%, ignore it, as though it was like a really tiny, incidental thing that people was given an opportunity to choose something and they chose it. I just can't understand why there's so much energy going into trying to unpick it.
No, we're
constantly.
not. We're not. We're saying that there are different ways to do that deal, and let's do a deal that's actually good for Britain.
But hang on, who said?
Back to you.
Who said? I mean, on the night of the referendum, who said this fight will go on because he thought he was going to lose?
I know you
said Farage.
But yes.
So, I mean, I love the way that side, the people on that side of the argument, were willing to go on and carry on the fight until they'd won. And then suddenly, no one must carry on the fight.
Yeah,
but we're already selling out. But this transitional deal, we've learned this week that all the ministers who were for leaving the single market, they're now all latched onto. This will mean that our borders will remain uncontrolled until 2021. That's not what people voted for, John. A lot of people went out to vote in that referendum because they didn't like the fact that we had uncontrolled immigration. Now we're finding it'll be 5 more years, before we can even begin to control. That's not what people voted for.
Well, even then the control is going to... I mean, I live in London, as most of you do. You look around London, you think, what is London going to be like if you haven't got migrants?
Yeah.
What are the big cities going to be like if you haven't got migrants? So you're going to have a system that allows people to come in for work, because otherwise half of what London is will disappear.
Until we train local talent to be able to pick up the slack. But that's going to take time. That doesn't happen overnight.
Well, they've got a few years to do
what business is supposed to do.
No, but it's also assuming that local talent wants to be trained to go into those industries.
There you go.
And if you're involved in the hotel business or the restaurant business, actually that's not the case.
No.
But no one's talking about stopping immigration. We're talking about controlling
it. That's what you just said.
No, I didn't. I always use the word control. We're talking about controlling it. And it's incredible this transitional deal has been done at a time now when Italy is in crisis. 85,000 migrants so far this year, predicted 250,000 by the end of the year. That is unsustainable, and it will be unsustainable for us too.
But June, in your intro, you said something along the lines of you want somebody to step forward and provide this alternative to Brexit. But I thought that's what the Lib Dems was doing in the election, and they didn't really get anywhere.
Well, that's not my point. My point is...
Well, I'd like you to answer, Michelle. I'll put it to you, if you would kindly answer Council's point.
No, if that's not my point.
Well, the Lib Dems stood on that, Lib Dems, and they had a shocking night.
But you were saying you wanted someone to basically stand up on that ticket and give them the opportunity, give us the opportunity to counter Brexit, and I thought that's what the Lib Dems did, and no one chose it.
Well, because it came from the Lib Dems. I don't think some people chose it.
Well, not many.
And also that's because it came from the Lib Dems. I'm talking about the fact that 67% of Labour supporters think that Brexit is a bad idea and definitely want a sensible Brexit.
To a particular
poll. Brexit. So the leadership should reflect that. That's what I'm saying.